This man is performing a score by George Brecht. These people are purchasing stamps by Robert Watts. This is part of a 1960 theater piece by Robert Whitman called American Moon. This is An Environment by Allan Kaprow. This is Roy Lichtenstein's portrait of his friend Allan Kaprow next to his portrait of art dealer Ivan Karp. This is an early George Seagulls sculpture. And this is from Lucas Samaras's honors thesis.
They came up with this license to be permissive. Each one is a totally different artist. And it is rather remarkable that 8 fabulous artists were all in the New Brunswick area at one time during this period of time.
It was a place to live. I had a job, and a number of us simply felt in that particular time and place urged by something that we wanted to do it. We had very little money. I was earning almost nothing, $3,200 a year as an instructor.
Kaprow's notion that art doesn't need to look like art attracted a circle of like-minded faculty and students who frequently participated in the experimental performances Kaprow called happenings, some of them held at George Seagulls' farm.
When he started the happenings, there was something good and something bad about it. One, there was a looseness to it, so you didn't have to have a script the way Hollywood has scripts or the theater has scripts. So it wasn't like a big DeMille production. It was kind of an ordinary group of materials that were used in a slightly offbeat way. So you could almost think it was like a crazy party in a way. And then you'd realize that it wasn't a party. It wasn't just for fun. You know, there was something more mysterious behind it. It was also almost like a bunch of prehistoric Neanderthals developing the idea of a ritual, although we weren't Neanderthals, you know.
More scripted were Robert Whitman's elaborate non-narrative theater pieces. American Moon was filmed by Whitman and featured Lucas Samaras in one of the more active roles.
There was a round area, and then all around it were like cave-like rooms, small, constructed of paper, heavy paper. And in front of each opening was kind of a plastic screen with little pieces of white paper. And then a film was projected so that you saw the film in parts, like a broken mirror, sort of. On top of these 6 cave-like things, there was a parapet, you know, going around. From up there, I would get on a swing.
When I did this stuff, it wasn't meant to be actual footage to recreate what the piece looked like. And I discovered that people tend to look at the material and they think they've experienced the piece, and they haven't. When you start out as sort of like ignorant and naive, as I was in particular, I think, and maybe some of the other people, I don't know, you don't know that there's not such, you don't know that there's no freedom. You know, nobody ever told you that there wasn't any freedom. So you just go on ahead and do what you're going to do, and that's not really an issue.
It was spectacular. It was ugly, it was dirty, it was intriguing, but it was only for a small group of people. Some were shocked, some were annoyed, some were insulted, you know. But they would come back week after week, you know, to see the next one. It's like being confronted with something you don't quite understand, but you're fascinated anyway.
A friend of mine, he was talking about people of my generation. He kind of turned around, he looked, and he said, you know, you guys are the first guys that didn't have to go to art school. He was kind of amazed at that.
So much of my training and much of the training of the world in the arts anyway had to do with a seeking after eternity, some kind of ultimate purpose that would pervade everything one did, and that would determine one's value. So I wanted to go the opposite direction. I thought that what had been ignored and was so much a feature of our time was its throwaway nature. We began hearing about planned obsolescence in those days as a feature of the economy. And while I might even disapprove of planned obsolescence in some operations, it seemed to be a marvelous thing to make art that you could just throw away in a garbage can.
Kaprow was influenced by Zen philosophy and John Cage's theories of chance, the notion that music could be composed from a random series of everyday sounds. Chance theory begot mail art. A postcard arrives announcing a delivery event. You send a random amount of money and get a random item in return. The transaction was the work of art. Chance was also behind the movement known as Fluxus. Fluxus artists like Robert Watts, Jeffrey Hendricks, and George Brecht sought to purge the world of so-called dead art forms. Their tools were performances and events based on a minimal set of instructions or score, such as Brecht's drip music, performed by Fluxus artist Larry Miller.
Now with drip music, what was amazing was listening to the sound. It was quite remarkable. It very much sums up this work that if one takes time to look at your contemporary life, the details, there are wonderful things there.
George Seagulls' take on contemporary life was literal and three-dimensional. While teaching drawing at the Rutgers Sketch Club, he began building figures of plaster and chicken wire from the chicken coops on his farm. Soon he was wrapping real people in plaster-soaked medical bandages, including his friends from Rutgers.
Siegel and I used to have drawing sessions together in which we would hire a model and we would draw throughout 2 or 3 hours of such sessions each week. And that's where we would talk constantly. That also influenced our artwork back and forth because I'd, look over my shoulder, he'd look over his. Well, that's nice, well, that's pretty trashy, and, that sort of thing. Now, mind you, that was a very old-fashioned practice at that point, which is paradoxical because the kind of work we were doing was not old-fashioned. And yet we felt connected to that older tradition.
Roy Lichtenstein also worked in that tradition. He already had a career and a gallery when he came to Rutgers to teach design.
He was painting in 2 different styles, which most of us didn't know at the time. One day, when our 2 families were together on a weekend, he revealed to me this other side, which was a cartoon side, as distinct from his more serious, painterly, abstract expressionist stuff that he'd been doing for public consumption. And when I saw that cartoon style, of which he had quite a few, I said, we've got to promote that. And I set about with him to do it.
I think the link for all the artists is wanting to make or deal with reality and deal with the real world. For Lucas, you've got real razor blades, you've got real toilet paper, you have real safety pins, real tacks, and they're used metaphorically to talk about the body, to talk about state of mind.
For me, I always thought that maybe I could contribute something in the area of traditional art making, which is why I focused on pastels for a long time. But then I was also doing paintings. And the paintings had a certain thickness to it. The paint had a certain thickness. And with the thick paint becoming almost 3-dimensional, it was just a small step to then think of some other substance like scalp metal or liquid aluminum or toilet paper and so on. So it was like a progression toward the solid and then reality, pins, whatever, wood, etc. There's also the idea of transgression, meaning you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. Just as a doctor has permission to go into areas of the body that the rest of us are not allowed to. Similarly, the artists always had that right.
Samaras and all the Rutgers 8 eventually went their own separate ways, taking their revolution with them into the wider world.
Did we know we were prophetic? I think all of us suspected that not only what we did would vanish with cheap materials and so on, but also cheap ideas, cheap enthusiasms, and cheap life. Yet I had to keep in mind the illogic of that if life is indeed fleeting, so is my life. And most of us, strangely enough, have lived, and we keep playing around.